Okay, so let's talk about aşk, love in Turkish. I want to talk about aşk and a relationship that I had to end just because I knew that it wasn't what God had for me. Okay, let's start from the beginning. So I started dating this guy, I think it was in 2017. Yeah, we dated for that whole year in 2017, and I met him at my workplace. Now, side note, you guys, we've all heard this before, but sometimes we just don't quite get it. But don't mix relationships, love, and the workplace. It's weird, it's awkward, and people notice, people talk, and if things go awry, it's just not a good look for anyone. So just don't do it. Avoid it by any means necessary, just avoid it. Anyways, I clearly did not take heed. So I met this guy at my workplace, and we will call him Joe, last name Schmo. So I met Joe at my workplace again, and we dated for a little over or under a year, plus or minus several weeks. And Joe was really cute, and he was so sweet, very kind-hearted. Everything was just right. He checked all the boxes. And as we were dating and our relationship was progressing, it was very clear that it was going in a direction that was quite serious. And he was very, very serious about me and our relationship and where it could have potentially gone. Now, he checked all the boxes for me as well in terms of physically, minus one box. He was smart, intelligent. He was going to school. He had goals, aspirations. And one of the biggest things that kept me in the relationship longer than I should have been was that I immediately saw his potential. So if I'm being real, I fell in love per se with his potential, not who he was in that season, which that was a really hard thing to admit, even at that time and even later after the relationship was over. So I had fallen for his potential, and the biggest hindrance for us was that he was not a believer. And of course I was at that time. He knew it. I made that very clear from the beginning. But I said, you know what? Again, he has so much potential. I'm not missionary dating. I'm just going to, be an example of what it looks like to be a real follower of Christ, right? Don't we all kind of we make those justifications, right? So I justified even just starting the relationship and continuing to be in it. I'm just going to pray for him, right? I'm going to pray for him that, what's that scripture in Ezekiel where God will turn his heart of stone into flesh and he'll become a believer, right? I literally prayed that a lot. And so I was like, yeah, with all this potential, if he would just follow Jesus, imagine the things he can do for the kingdom, right? That's what kept me in the relationship. And so we were dating. He met my family. I met his. I even traveled with him to meet more family, like holidays, birthdays, just big life events, right, that you would share with a significant other. And so our relationship was getting more and more serious. However, at the same time, as our relationship was advancing, the more it progressed, the more I felt the tug, like God, like just tapping me on the shoulder, like, hey, daughter, this is not what I have for you. Not to mention, to be completely honest and transparent, I made it very clear from the jump that I'm a believer and I'm preserving myself for marriage. So, that's like the line, right? And so like, you know, how do I even say this? But after a certain point, yes, that's very clear. Okay, he was very respectful of that. He honored that. But then the relationship still went into a bit of unholy grounds, if you know what I mean. um, if you're making out and doing everything else but actual intercourse, you are still treading on unholy grounds. Okay, so quit playing. I was playing and thinking that I was still keeping it holy, which that is a complete lie if there ever was one. So all these things were happening. The relationship has entered unholy grounds. And not only that, we started arguing about matters of faith. Again, he wasn't a believer. I was devoted and just trying to grow in my faith. And so our light conversations turned into full on arguments and heated debates. And again, admittedly, a lot of the time my words were not seasoned with salt and grace, or whatever that scripture is. Salt, seasoned with salt and grace. Yeah, whatever that scripture says. My words were not that, okay? So heated debates, just not constant, but just arguing whenever it would come up because I just really wanted him to believe, right? And from his perspective, he was like, I don't need to believe, we can make this work otherwise, and other conversations like the sort. So the more we argued, the more serious we're getting, the more just other factors were coming up. The more guilt I felt, the more I felt very burdened, and just from the beginning I knew better, right? And I just kept feeling a heavier and heavier weight. Anyways, to speed up this story, it got to a point, you guys, where I was frustrated in the relationship. I wasn't sure how I was feeling about him. I knew that I liked him a lot. Maybe I would even say I even loved him, but I just knew that it couldn't work. And I knew at some point it would all culminate to me having to make a choice. And God distinctly told me, I remember he said, it's either him or it's me. And at that point, I knew what I had to do. And I knew, and again, all throughout the relationship, I knew, like, man, this is eventually going to have to, this ultimatum I was eventually going to have to reach. And now we're going into closer to 2018, where I'm having this tug of war. And so when God made clear, what his will was, I had a choice to make. And so the holidays had just passed. We're into the new year of 2018. And again, just more arguments, just more tension, awkwardness. I was pulling away. He was, kind of like trying to close that gap. Like, he was very pursuant, very consistent, he was a fighter. In terms of like him wanting to like save and preserve the relationship. And the more I kept pulling away, I was just like, I'm gonna have to make this choice. Like, this is coming like full head. It's bubbling up, and I'm gonna have to make that choice, and rather soon. And I don't recall exactly what, but there was a situation, now this is January 2018, where something happened that made me really upset. And for me, that was like the last straw. Like, okay, I really need to end this relationship. It was a matter of when. Again, I knew that I had to end it, but I was having a real tug of war between staying in it to work it out, because perhaps he will eventually become a believer, right? And ending it because I knew that was what was best. And so I remember one night I was sitting in my room and I was thinking about all these things and talking to God, and I was thinking about the choice I had to make. And I kid you not, as soon as I decided to let the relationship go and turn my heart and my full devotion and attention to God, it was like I met Jesus all over again. Not only was the weight lifted, but it was like I get Jesus back. That's how I felt. That's how I get to be with Jesus again. And so now this is in February. And I think it was the very next day I decided to break up with Joe. And that day happened to be Valentine's Day. Now, before y'all start judging me and talking about how can she be ice cold, broke up with the poor guy on Valentine's Day, like even to this day, my brother will sometimes bring up like, Jasmine, you were ice cold, you broke up with this guy on Valentine's Day. I could not go one more day. I could not go one more day in that relationship knowing that I got Jesus back, right? I couldn't go one more day. I didn't care what day it was. It could have been Valentine's Day, could have been Christmas, could have been the birthday. I did not care. I just wanted to be with Jesus again, and I knew what I had to do. Didn't mean it was not an easy decision. Like in my spirit, it was like, yeah, no brainer, right? But in the natural, it was really tough. And so I broke up with him on Valentine's Day, and you can imagine the heartache. And I think that was the biggest struggle, was being responsible for the pain and the heartache that I inflicted. I broke up with him on Valentine's Day, and I mentioned moments ago he was a fighter, so he really fought for the relationship, and I just, no, I'm sorry, it has to be this way. And it was the best decision that I could have made. Not only did I felt like I got Jesus back, proverbially, metaphorically, Jesus was always with me. But that year turned out to be one of the greatest years for me, just in so many areas. I love to travel, so that year it was a good year for travel. I went to many amazing places. I would later experience another challenging season with God, but out of that season, Cisna came to be. If you remember, I started Cisna in the fall of 2018. I broke up with Joe on Valentine's Day 2018. So Cisna was birthed that year. I led on one of my trips, I led my Airbnb host to Christ and had so many revelations with that alone. So all to say, although, God asked me to lay this relationship down, and it was hard. It was really, really hard, again, because of the pain I knew it would cause, and I didn't want to be that person. However, when it was all said and done, gosh, I can't even imagine what would have happened if I had stayed in the relationship. And so if you find yourself in a similar situation, you're in a relationship that you shouldn't be in, and God is tugging and nudging you, I empathize. I empathize with you 100%. It is not easy. However, on the other side of saying yes to God and being obedient is what God has for you, and that is the best. You cannot compare. And so I just pray that you have the strength to make that decision. It is not easy, but I think deep down you know that it is the best thing for you to do, and it's what God would have you do. So stay encouraged, be strong and courageous, and just continue to press into God, and may His will be done in your life.